Welcome back to Arcane Adventures Recapped. Today, we will be discussing the events and recapping the episodes of Chapter 9, Between the Threads, of our Lorem Ipsum campaign. Without further ado, let's go ahead and begin this recap. Lorem Ipsum returns to Provenere, through the teleportation circle hidden deep within the ruins of the Bright Shadow's underground alchemical dungeon, only to realize, in the moments after their arrival, that Owenel is missing. Though they remember him stepping back into the circle with them in Akadon, all that remains of him here is a satchel of gear and a carefully rolled letter explaining his choice to stay behind, to embrace solitude amid Akadon's silent ruins, and to sort through his personal thoughts. Now, climbing a ladder into the northwestern neighborhoods of Provenere in the wee hours of the night, the group is struck by the stark contrast between the familiar warmth of the city air and the unnerving stillness, where once nightlife thrived, now silence reigns. They make their way to their residence, the Coastal Chateau, atop Concilus Hill, and are greeted first by a vermine security attendant, that is like a little rodent person, named Sir Loric Jaxel, before the estate's manager, Marigold Burrows, a familiar face, rushes out with excitement, insisting that they rest, since it is so early in the morning, before burdening them with the changes wrought about during their absence. Over breakfast the next morning, Marigold lays out updates. The Gilded Order, a militant organization, now occupies Provenere, with full military authority sanctioned by the higher powers of Brontero and the Alliance of Revius, and Oshivester and Hydroxylvexen from the Union of Venere. The chateau itself had also survived an attempted raid, and a fire that forced a partial rebuilding, and their librarian, Savara Quillshade, had been arrested and detained at Concilus Keep under a bond of 700 gold pieces by the Gilded Order. Yet survival had also welcomed some opportunity, and Marigold spoke of expansions, political maneuvering, and an urgent invitation to visit one Professor Larson Archulets. Not long after, a visitor arrived at the scene. Shintal the Wise, the father of Kaiko Stormpaw, of the Storm Dojo in Provenere, was seeking aid as the Gilded Order continues to pressure the dojo towards closure after Master Stormpaw, the younger, of course, Kaiko, refused to train their soldiers in the monastic combat traditions. Paloma offered some coin and support, and then accompanied Shintal, Genevieve, Marek, and Zeros to the dojo while the rest of the group separated. Ultrix tended to personal errands and shopping, while Sizik searched for ways to increase his vitality, and Velmon remains at the chateau poring over political texts tied to his home of Phyrexia. At the Storm Dojo, though, Paloma engaged Kaiko Stormpaw in a spar that begins evenly, with both monks moving with precise grace, until something that Master Stormpaw said snaps something inside of Paloma, and fury takes hold. She quickly overwhelms Master Stormpaw, and in a brutal finish, she wins the match before the stunned onlookers. Over tea afterwards, Kaiko offers insight and guidance, and Shintal repays their aid, their contributions to the dojo in whatever capacity that may be, by teaching techniques to steal resolve even at death's door. The group disperses once more. Paloma and Shintal return to the chateau, and Sizik places a down payment on a potion to be commissioned, while Genevieve also does commissions of her own, a custom enchantment for her lute from Madame Lepori. Marek, seeking combat at Chivalry's Round, gets into a little bit of legal trouble, but we'll get back to that in a moment. And Zeros wanders into the Claremorth University Library, finding an entirely fascinating book on sea adventures and nothing more of note, honestly. Disappointment finds Marek when Chivalry's Round hosts no events, and suspicion soon follows as the Gilded Order questions him. A quick lie about his identity escalates into detainment, though Marek escapes and sprints back to the chateau ahead of pursuit. Reunited at their estate, Lorem Ipsum debates upgrading their property and even future plans amongst them as Paloma reunites with Irsi, Ultrix's youngest sibling, his sister, who had started some basic monk training in Paloma's absence, and Sizik is seized by a sudden prophetic episode. Moments later, Zeros detects the unmistakable signature of scrying upon the group, tracing it back to the Soul Matron and Delalore, as the eyes of death seem to listen and watch. As Shental departs the group, leaving behind a small shrine in the foyer of the coastal chateau to collect donations for the Storm Dojo, Lorem Ipsum decides that their next stop must in fact be a visit to Professor Arcalet's and whatever truth awaits at his so-called tea party, according to his letter. After final discussions with Marigold Burroughs regarding renovations and upgrades to their property, Lorem Ipsum ventures to meet the professor at Claremorth University, only to discover that the professor himself fears that he is unable to speak freely and safely in his own office, as he silently beckons the group to follow him to the campus gardens outside. There, Arcaletz reveals his recent discoveries and findings. The Binds of Rhyme, which was a device that was brought earlier in our story by Lorem Ipsum, found in a little bit of a scuffle that occurred in the Hex, was a device in fact once tied to the Rhyme Hollow Gate, a Provius outpost, and these Binds of Rhyme in particular are definitively broken remains and remnants, and that functional versions were likely replaced much time ago, with these now being stored in Bruntero's Archives of the Vakari in Bruntero City. But, more alarming still, the tome that they entrusted him, now identified as the Ascendant Rites of the Arcane Apotheosis Ethereum, has been confirmed to in fact be an ancient artifact tied to the Prime City, a relic capable of enabling ascendancy to divinity itself, though unreadable without its companion key. However, Arcaletz grimly informs the group that 22 days ago, a group claiming to be the Gilded Order accessed the university vault and took the tome, alongside hundreds of other research documents and items, an act made possible only because Headmistress Athena Claremorth of the Claremorth University, uncharacteristically, might I note, failed to verify the credentials of such claimees. This lapse, combined with the intelligence the professor received from Vilas Kemper, former secretary to Madame Cleogenorum, who is still employed at Consilas Keep with the Gilded Order, has led the professor to suspect corruption among former council members and even the university's own leadership. But stranger still, Vilas noted that the Gilded Order never had any operations of his knowledge, at least, in the university vault, suggesting that someone else, perhaps imposters maybe, had accessed the vault instead. Knowing that sharing this knowledge places them all in danger, Arcaletz nonetheless entrusts Lorem Ipsum with this, and agrees to investigate the mysterious blue moon symbol that Lorem Ipsum spoke of further in the coming weeks. The group then splits, and some accompany Sizik to the Hex District to rid him of a cursed staff he carries from the Frostbitten Waste, while others head towards Consilas Keep. In the Hex, Sizik successfully breaks attunement with the staff and sells it to Madame Lepori, the proprietor of Hexes and Scrolls, for a staggering sum despite its curse. Afterwards, Sizik, Paloma, Velmon, and Zeros head to the Voyage Reserve to allow Sizik and Paloma to open a joint bank account with this banking institution before returning home to the chateau. Back on Consilas Hill at Consilas Keep, Ultrix, Marek, Genevieve, and Pura secure the release of Savara Quillshade, the tiefling librarian of the coastal chateau, by paying her bond, freeing both her and her research to be returned to the chateau promptly. During that time, Pura attempted to scale Consilas Keep's outside walls to investigate the upper floors, but triggers an alarm and forces a hasty retreat. Back at the chateau, Marigold raises the prospect of formalizing the estate into a official, recognized noble house, but before plans can actually be solidified, the doors are thrown open by Gilded Order guards led by one of the Gilded Order higher-ups, known as Unburdened Inquisitor Rosina Racket, who announces an investigation into sending magic traced to the property earlier that day. Under pressure, the group discloses the nature of their spells and is compelled by what the Gilded Order refers to as arcane compliance regulations to surrender blood samples to have their sending magic tracked and taxed in accordance with Gilded Order security policies. Marek's refusal nearly ignites violence in the foyer, and though Genevieve attempts to slip away, both she and Marek are also forcibly sampled before the Unburdened Inquisitor issues a chilling warning that future defiance will be met with harsher consequences, and then she departs. In the aftermath, Ultrix consults Savara about her work and research into Silvar Adranas, and does some crafting, ignoring Velmon's pleas to take time with family, while Genevieve, still shaken, collapses into a full panic attack outside, and as the afternoon wanes, Lorem Ipsum must now analyze the fronts ahead of them, and plan out the best course of action moving forward. As the afternoon unfolds, Lorem Ipsum disperses across Provenary to tend to more personal matters. Pura pays a visit to Madame Lepori at Hexes and Scrolls and sells one of his Acadonian relics for an impressive sum. While Marek withdraws early to his room to rest and attune to new gear, Zeros wanders the cathedral district of Provenary and looking over text of Helm, and speaking with the watchful father Joran, the priest of Helm in Provenary, about an unsettling divine encounter that Zeros had. Paloma spends the day training Irsi, while Sizik gathers fresh vegetables from the garden of the chateau. Velmon consults with Marigold Burrows and acquires an updated city map, and Ultrix crafts deep into the evening, increasingly distracted by a persistent ringing that fades in and out of his hearing. Over dinner that night, speculations turn towards the Gilded Order's arcane restrictions, with Paloma suggesting that only those with registered Voyage Reserve accounts can properly send or receive magical messages within the city. But the conversation is soon overtaken by quietness, and some of our adventurers note that as night falls and clear skies reveal a breathtaking new phenomenon overhead. Eyes turn upwards at the sudden appearance of planetary rings, gleaming like a golden halo around Ilethia, prompting whispers across the city as the group turns in for bed. Before dawn, Paloma and Irsi meditate and train, while Velmon invites Daikia and Akarek to breakfast in hopes of a private conversation, only for Ultrix to join unexpectedly with the group. And what follows is a strained, ill-received intervention as Velmon, supported by Zeros, voices concerns that Ultrix has grown distant from his family and avoidant of his mother since his death in Akadon, prompting Daikia to withdraw in discomfort and Ultrix to bristle at the accusatory tone before excusing himself, leaving the remaining members of Lorem Ipsum to sit in unresolved tension and ultimately go their separate ways. As morning pursues and continues, Genevieve and Marek head towards the Hex District to retrieve Genevieve's enchanted lute, while Pura checks in on Ultrix amid another flare of the ringing episodes he's been having of late. And Paloma and Sizik visit the Voyage Reserve to clear a fraudulent hold on Sizik's account caused, strangely, by records listing him as deceased, whatever could that mean, of course, with the Voyage Reserve quickly correcting it, and then they reunite by chance at Hexes and Scrolls with Marek and Genevieve. There, Genevieve collects her instruments, and Sizik purchases a platinum random magic item box and a particular and peculiar enchanted lantern. Velmon spends time alone in reflection, while Zeros attempts unsuccessfully to contact the soul matron from the estate's cathedral, and the day passes in rare calm. But for Ultrix, his crafting is repeatedly disrupted by the ringing, now worsening. Seeking answers, he visits the Chris Medical Clinic, failing to reach Raylan Vost by sending along the way, and is briskly dismissed by Dr. Now, a medical doctor, with assurances of it being tinnitus or possible concussion. Yet upon returning to the chateau, Ultrix chooses not to ignore the sound but to focus in on it, until shifting tones resolve into faint outlines of images in his mind, revealing the impression of a strange piece of metal somewhere in the city, market buildings, and leaving him unshakably, inexplicably certain that he must find it and acquire it. And once again, night settles over the city of Provenary. Over the course of 10 days, Lorem Ipsum settles into a bit of a rhythm of downtime at the coastal chateau, which echoes with scaffolding, hammers, and the renovation of their bastion. Each member is pulled in different directions by unfinished business and various side quests. Ulrich spends long hours crafting, modifying his siphon to draw power directly from the anchor of Akadon, as Daikia finally breaks the silence to finally check in on him. And through the faint, ever-persistent and present ringing in his ears that never fades, he pushes through to complete his work. He made it routine to leave the city most days, just getting beyond the reach of what we have referred to as the arcane boundary of Provenary, to successfully send a message to Raylan Vost down in the Twin Reservoirs, the capital of the Union of Fenary, and learn of rising tensions in Hestara, and a disappointing truth that the Chancellor and Aquatoria see no current issue of the Gilded Order's rule, advising him instead to seek noble aid from the houses face-to-face, advice that weighs more heavily after an unproductive meeting with Commandant Katzakilks, one of the other leaders of the Gilded Order, that Ultrix notes ends without progress or any gained trust. Genevieve and Marek instead spend long days conversating together and unraveling the tangled paths that led them here. Genevieve filling her evenings with music and simple comforts like potato soup beneath the stars and freshly cut hair, styled by Hashi at the Threaded Spool in Provenary's Hex District, while Marek searches for work at the Steel and Thundelver refinery, and he overhears conversation passed between the laborers referencing the Prime and murmurs that the grass is never greener. For personal reasons, though, he sought answers in the cathedral district, where Gendros Ithar of Ilmater recognizes the black ink-like mark behind Marek's ear as a sign of what he referred to as the Sabers of Suffering, hinting at an angelic lineage steeped in endurance and perseverance through pain. Paloma trains daily with Irsi, refining discipline and form, and exchanged messages with Yazira occasionally, who is now traveling south towards Elatar Bay with her brother, Crater. Pura immerses himself in hemocraft study research at Claremont University before being pointed towards the unsettling tutelage of Dr. Sarek Koss to refine his bloodcraft, all while planning a future performance at the Tequila Mockingbird with Sizik and Genevieve, and receiving a heavy box from Marigold containing 1,100 platinum, his requested withdrawal from their finances. Sizik studies his book of influence and leadership and converses with the sentient green flame within his lantern, which is revealed to be Dearest Dux. He documents Akadon's history in secret during his downtime and reaches out to Marek in an attempt to gain and mend trust after the Gilded Order's blood compliance incident that happened a few days before. Sizik also later visits Evelyn McKinnon to learn how grief and inheritance have reshaped her family's fate. Velmon pens letters to Daikia and Ultrix in the wake of a strained breakfast confrontation and gifts Paloma a bracelet etched with the word Rascon, a nickname only the two of them share to each other. Meanwhile, Zeros identifies their own black scale, with some help from Ultrix, as a scale of Noel's body, their own form at some point, and uses it in the careful crafting of a new amulet. They later confer with Paloma about the Acadonian reality chip, testing it only to find that reality bending just enough to be dangerous, revealing that a dormant copy of Cortuxic lies embedded within Genevieve's mind, inaccessible for now and needing future research. As the final nails are set, hirelings complete their assignments, and new staff take up post within the expanded coastal chateau, Lorem Ipsum regroups and prepares for their next steps ahead, whatever that may be. Following the completion of renovations at the coastal chateau, Lorem Ipsum gathers over breakfast on the morning of Imtet 41st. Marigold Burrows delivers a series of updates, joined by reports from librarian Savara Quillshade and storehouse worker Talek Hobbentrack. Savara outlines her findings on the most recent information theft at Claremont University, noting that similar incidents across the past decade appear linked to a coordinated syndicate routing stolen materials through Elatar Bay, Unipol Port, and Provenary's Skyport, with a striking detail that most of the targeted items from this most recent theft are related to pre-Centrum War studies, with other valuables that were deliberately ignored, strongly suggesting expert foreknowledge and intent, a pattern that leaves both Genevieve and Marek with a suspicion about who might truly be responsible. Talek Hobbentrack, though, shares his own intelligence, identifying House Chris, Wheatflow, Bladebreaker, and Roran as likely opposed to the Gilded Order, while Houses Claremorth, Steele, Thundelver, Chardolin, Wervanian, and Cromwellin appear aligned with them, a troubling consolidation of power over education, religion, finance, industry, and the Skyport itself, while the remaining houses are uncertain, save for Zadira, whose disappearance following the closure of the Silver Serpent Casino does in fact exist, but Talek Hobbentrack does present an invitation to what he believes is a private meeting at the Shale House on Imtet 44th at precisely 8:17 p.m., a gathering that the group resolves to attend, hoping it to be allies that they can possibly make. The discussion then turns to next steps, with tensions flaring when Pura suggests breaking into Kansata's Keep to destroy the Gilded Order's blood samples, while Sizik firmly is in opposition. The debate is cut short, however, when the ringing of Ultrix's ears suddenly crushes intensity, driving him rapidly into the Hex District to visit Madame Lepori and purchase a tuning fork, which finally silences the sound, at least for now. In his absence, Paloma and Genevieve act on mounting curiosity and risk using Mirex to probe Cortuxic embedded in Genevieve's mind, allowing Paloma to enter her unconscious mind and speak directly with the construct. Cortuxic confesses its fear of erasure, its impulsive actions that ultimately urged Genevieve to activate the Everpulse reactor back in Akadon that was almost a doomsday ending, and it hopes for extraction into a safer vessel, while also revealing unsettling truths about Genevieve's origins. Paloma quickly carries these truths to Marek before the two return to explain everything to Genevieve. Did this revelation end in awkward silence and a bit of conclusion? Yes. Oranges. Definitely oranges. Elsewhere in the chateau's rain-soaked courtyard, though, that night, Sizik and Pura share a conversation, and Sizik admits feeling unseen and unheard by Ultrix, and Pura offers steady reassurance beneath the drizzle. As the next couple of days pass, our adventurers gather over lunch, eating the famous Ayazlan dish of baked potatoes, and Pura pitches ideas to Genevieve and Sizik regarding a performance that they could put on at Tequila Mockingbird, and the group begins to discuss the looming meeting at the Shale House, occurring later that night. Lorem Ipsum prepares themselves for whatever awaits them there. At the appointed time of 8:17 p.m., Lorem Ipsum prepares for their meeting at the Shale House, each member pursuing quiet errands and gathering impressions of a city tightening under unseen pressure. Pura delivers a gift of champagne to the estate of Esquire Warren, only to find him absent, leaving it instead with the housekeeper Chanella. While Zeros surveys the cathedral plaza and confirms growing unease of the city's religious leadership that chooses to defend the Gilded Order as the will of the Vicari. Velmon ventures into the Hex District to meet with Aurel, who draws him into a private space where they speak at length about Provenere, Shoni, and Aurel's careful efforts to shield the Emperor of the Crimson Accord from the Clay Arm, before the conversation turns personal and Aurel recounts Velmon's father with warmth and respect, revealing how he gained influence in Phyrexia. Back at the coastal chateau, Daikia pulls Aldrich aside to apologize for her distance in the days after his death and return, and the moment softens as Aldrich proudly demonstrates his new Wings unit, taking flight across the city to research the political structure of the Alliance of Provias at Claremont University before rejoining the group for dinner and a final review of their plan. Later that night, when Lorem Ipsum arrives at the Shale House at 8:17 p.m., the building appears abandoned and shuttered until a voice calls out behind them, revealing to be Relzar Kinper, the drow who once first connected them to Madame Denorum many months ago. After inspecting their invitation, he leads them through the dark annex halls and up a ladder into a dusty attic chamber, lit by low lamps where several figures await: Dr. Zilacris, Esquire Roaring, Farmer Raya Wheatflow, Miss Bolar Bladebreaker, Miss Ellis Redier, and her daughter Lydia, Sir Pricklesworth von Meonte Esquire III, Wesley and Evelyn McKinnon, and Madame Lepori. Many of these individuals are former council members that sit alongside other allies, all who speak openly of their shared concern for Provenare's survival amid the Gilded Order's accelerating consolidation and expansion of power. Information is exchanged carefully as they reveal the existence of an insider within the Order and massive expansions and diversions of coin towards secret projects known as the Golden Terrace, the construction of an arcane relayed node intercept lattice capable of triangulating arcane signatures across the city, and a notion that widespread surveillance and intrusion, even into private homes, may soon occur. Lorem Ipsum responds in kind, sharing a bit of what they know of the status and whereabouts of Madame Cleo Genorum and Mox Flynn back in Pajakeen, as well as their discovery of some rather damning evidence against the Vicari of Brontero, and their own encounters with the Gilded Order's reach. Though the Alliance makes clear it is focused on endurance and influence rather than open confrontation at the current time, the meeting ends with a unanimous vote to welcome Lorem Ipsum into their circle and the promise of future invitations, alongside possible support of Lorem Ipsum should their adventure choose to lead them down the route of pursuing and becoming a noble house as well. But for now, as the group returns home beneath the quiet city light, they do so with heavy thoughts, knowing that at dawn, it will bring a journey to Elitar Bay, and with it, a task far more dangerous than tonight's whispered politics. But dawn soon arrives, and spills over Consalis Hill and through the tall windows of the coastal chateau as Lorem Ipsum gathers for an early breakfast. Their course is set without hesitation: Elitar Bay, more than 2,500 miles across Phenorbia by way of Ultrix's portal orb received from his mother, and from there the hunt for the elusive crime lord known as the Titanium Blade, Azuzal. Marek activates the orb that Daikia entrusted to him, and reality folds, and they emerge at roughly 3 a.m. inside of a dusty trinket shop whose shelves sag beneath worthless curios, only to be greeted by a 3-foot-tall kobold lunging from the back room with the dagger raised before recognizing Marek and Genevieve, who Marek softly regards as Kogoth Softscales. Kogoth drops his scraggly accent as Marek calls in a heavy favor to locate Azuzal's whereabouts. In the meantime, while Velmon, Ultrix, and Sizik remain at the shop, Genevieve and Marek guide the others to the Lyre in the Middle, a vibrant cafe, tavern, and brothel alive even at the early hours of the morning, where Madame Songbird, also known as Vanessa Songweaver, or better known as Genevieve's mother, welcomes them for tea. What begins warmly turns sharp as Genevieve confronts her about Azuzal, newly revealed as her father, and Vanessa recounts the night that they met many years ago, how he paid well for her services, and later how he once came to claim their 2-year-old daughter, later returning after some kind of failure to kill the young Genevieve. But Vanessa struck a desperate bargain to save Genevieve's life, and one Madame Songbird did, in fact, admit that fractures Genevieve's old assumptions and begins a quiet mending something between mother and daughter. By noon, Kogoth delivers upon his intelligence that the Bladed Islet, a fortified crag a mile west of the city of Elatar Bay, where the titanium blade is said to reside when he is not tending his operations. Hearing this, Lorem Ipsum heads west beyond the city walls and moves through bush and shrubbery to find and scout the 3-story, well-guarded keep. Retreating, they wait for the night to arrive and then swim around the southern side of the island and position themselves for a silent breach. But when Marek is spotted, alarms and shouts scatter across the building and shatter the quiet, forcing a swift and brutal assault across the battlements. Lorem Ipsum scales the walls as fast as possible and assaults the fortress defenders. Yet, Azuzal remains unseen during the volition of this battle. As they breach the fortress and infiltrate the keep, Zeros opens a balcony door and finds Azuzal seated calmly with 2 of his lieutenants and a cloaked figure as though expecting company. Finishing up outside, the group regathers in the now crowded living room of the keep. Questions begin to fly as Genevieve's sharp and personal accusations with Velmon's haunted ones, while Azuzal answers are delivered with chilling composure, offering a deal, unfazed by the blades at his door. When Marek, however, recognizes one of his lieutenants as his own long-lost brother, Zareth, and suddenly the atmosphere shifts to a deciding point. Zareth calmly asks, "Which one of us dies tonight?" And Marek answers without hesitation, "You." Suddenly, with emotions and intentions laid bare, conflict now seems inevitable. In an instant, steel flashes as Zareth lunges at Marek, only for Velmon to intercept the poison-tipped strike, the blade sinking deep into his gut. The room is plunged into magical darkness, Azuzal's voice echoing in retreat. A door opens, serpent movement, and a whispered "Hello, sister," and then shadows peel back. Now a massive serpentine abomination coils into view at the heart of the chamber. A battle is renewed and is far from finished. Combat erupts in the keep as Lorem Ipsum squares off against Zareth, a hooded spellcaster, and a large serpent coiled at the room's center. Marek clashes with his brother in a storm of steel and bitter words, supported by Paloma, Shoni, and Genevieve, while Ultrix and Sizik, after hastening Paloma, hammer the hooded figure back into the wall until Genevieve and Marek can close in. And Pyrrha's hemostatic repeater cracks as he twists blood against his foes. The serpent rears, then floods the chamber with a blinding, poisonous spray that leaves half of the party reeling after Zeros rushes to Velmon's aid and Shoni lashes out at Velmon's command. Spells streak the air, and one is cut down by Sizik's counterspell, but the tide shifts sharply when Azuzal and his other lieutenant, Visera, return. Azuzal dashes through the fray and rips the reality chip from Zeros' hand. Genevieve vanishes into shadow to strike at a perfect moment, and Viserys lands some dangerous attacks. Several members of Lorem Ipsum are brought low, and Genevieve lands a perfectly timed quip that rattles Zareth and Visera right after the hooded caster falls. Yet another venomous blast from a large serpent leaves Lorem Ipsum bloodied. FSD is lobbed into the field and briefly scrambles Visera's focus. Sizik suffers a devastating internal necrosis wound from Azuzal that shatters his concentration and drops haste, stunning Paloma mid-stride. The massive serpent dies in a final thrash. Zeros momentarily incapacitates Azuzal, and Velmon, through Shoni, delivers the killing blow to Zareth as he murmurs his final words to Marek, and collapses into his own brother's arms, passing on a small note to his brother's hand. A moment of grief ignites into fury as Marek barrels after Azuzal, while Ultrix blasts Visera into a corner. But in a contingent gambit, Visera pulls herself free of the grasp of FSD and produces a portal orb, while Azuzal flashes a runic piece of parchment. Ultrix identifies it and shouts. Sizik counters the sigil from behind the door, sparing a runic activation across the keep. Yet, the orb itself still flares to life, and Marek lunges into the vortex with them as Azazel and Viscera, and now Marek, teleport away. In the few moments after the room stills, Velmon seizes Azazel's spilled blood to glean hundreds and hundreds of aliases from his own book and trace Azazel to some point several hundred miles southwest of here. In the same moment, Zeros scries on Marek, watching him in a dimly lit room of coppery color as he lands blows aimed at Azazel, and Viscera intercepts one. Azazel then opens another rift with a ring, kicking Marek back through as he falls into the chamber amid a snarky farewell, and Marek crashes back into the room here on the Bladed Islet. Left amid blood-slicked wooden floors and walls, a battered Lorem Ipsum gathers what they can of themselves, now needing to calculate their next move, and will make haste to flee this wretched keep. Lorem Ipsum finds themselves in the now quiet Bladed Islet. With Azazel and Viscera escaped, even if barely, the fight is not over, but merely paused until they meet again. In the meantime, Marek scoops up the body of his brother and is about to take him outside when Ultrix suddenly hears the faint and familiar ringing in his ears, accompanied by a new sensation radiating down his back. Understanding, Ultrix focuses on the feeling, and his eyes inadvertently lock onto Marek walking towards the courtyard. 7 platinum pieces dislodge from Ultrix's pockets, fly across the room as if pulled by a magnet, and strike perfectly into Zareth's back. Ultrix relays to Marek that his theory remains that something inside of Zareth is calling to him, and Marek permits such, but only in private, in the loss of his brother, so the two head outside alone. Meanwhile, Sizik stumbles into pain from necrosis eating away at his organs, while Paloma rushes to his side, soon joined by Genevieve. Hyper-focused Zeros ransacks the nearby rooms and attached chapel, while Velmon and Genevieve head to the third-floor master bedroom, or Azazel's private chambers, I should say, while they find the ashes of burned documents. But with careful work, they are able to piece together fragments and reveal contracts linking several of these events across Phenorbia, back to Azazel. Elsewhere, Paloma carries Sizik as they rummage the kitchen and storage rooms before heading to the walls to loot fallen guards. Ultrix performs exploratory surgery on Zareth's corpse and ultimately identifies the object drawing him near, Zareth's spine. After removing it under Marek's supervision, Marek is left alone to bury his brother, offering a few quiet but meaningful words before returning to sit beneath a large tree in the courtyard. Genevieve joins Paloma and Sizik as they search for office supplies and documents. Velmon picks the armory lock and loots what remains inside, while Ultrix returns to the master bedroom to canvass it again, taking an interest in a book that Azazel had been reading, Serpentine Culture, the Superior Genetic Code. Gaining insight into Azazel's personal views before leaving, Ultrix notices one book less dusty than others. When he tugs it, the bookshelf swings back, revealing a hidden chamber containing experimental vials and a large chest filled with coin. Genevieve joins Marek in the courtyard, and the two converse briefly, but then sit in silence, eventually falling asleep side by side underneath the oak. Meanwhile, Ultrix discovers the chest bare after looting it, and realizes that the base of said chest is in fact magically warded, so he instead recruits Sizik and Paloma for help. Through Sizik's magic, the chest bottom is revealed to be a hidden latch, and once dispelled, Paloma smashes through the lock with her bracer, exposing a narrow ladder shaft that descends into the darkness. Joined then by Velmon and Zeros, they descend into a chamber beneath the keep, finding a teleportation circle. When Ultrix alters and copies such circle, while Zeros identifies 16 detonation glyphs along the walls, linked likely to the detonator ruin that Sizik counterspelled during Azazel's escape not moments ago. They also uncover a lockbox and a safe, and the lockbox contains a deed to the islet signed by one of the 5 members of the Zerolith, Almorzion Duscalant. The safe holds platinum bars and 2 valuable diamonds. Regrouping in the late night, they flee the islet. Genevieve and Paloma ride to Elitar Bay to retrieve Vanessi, Genevieve's mother, who survived an earlier attack on her suite. Genevieve wastes no time urging her mother to leave, convincing her to return with them to Provenere. Reunited shortly after, Ultrix brings Lorem Ipsum into the newly remade siphon and teleports them back to the coastal chateau in Provenere, arriving at 5 a.m., where they soon disperse to rest. In the middle of the moments that are still that follow, Genevieve and Marek share an embrace of shared survival, while Sizik lies in pain at Paloma's side. Zeros introspects and connects with Reaper, the devout follower bound within, and Velmon communes with Shoni, while Ultrix retreats to his room, already contemplating his next step. And with that, Lorem Ipsum finds rest much needed. Lorem Ipsum awakens in the early afternoon and gathers for lunch at the coastal chateau, where they discuss next steps for themselves and their hirelings. They ask Marigold to reach out to Madame Lepori to research possible magical defenses that could be added to the chateau, while Marigold also begins assembling the paperwork necessary to consolidate the House of Lorem Ipsum into a formal noble house and entity within the city of Provenere at the request of our adventurers. In the meantime, Lorem Ipsum splits up to handle various tasks around the city. Paloma and Irsi travel to the Storm Dojo, where Paloma learns of a troubling situation. The dojo relies and needs on 20,000 gold pieces to keep its doors open by the end of Imtet, only 5 days away. She briefly discusses this matter with Master Stormpaw, but spends several hours training Ultrix's sister, her prodigy Irsi, alongside him as well. Paloma eventually leaves Irsi to continue training and heads into the city to run errands, finding herself exploring the Old Ward, the city's oldest district, where she steals a collection of gems and jewelries from a shop called Ducal's Dazzlings. On her way out, she bumps into a hobgoblin woman, and the two share a brief but awkward conversation before parting ways. However, they unintentionally follow the same route back to the city center and make small talk along the way. The hobgoblin introduces herself as Kiev, a airship pilot who regularly travels between major skyports of Aletheia, and Paloma notices that Kiev's accent is similar to Sizik's, learning that she too hails from Kilauea. After an interesting conversation, though, Paloma parts ways, having accidentally missed her stop in the Hex, and visits several stores to sell the stolen goods for profit. Meanwhile, Ultrix and Pura visit Gnome Depot to purchase construction equipment before heading to Hexes and Scrolls to see Madame Lepori, though not before Pura buys a bouquet of flowers and a decorative box. The pair later visits the Claremore University Library to research their own interests, with Pura leaving with an intriguing book. Back at the coastal chateau, Genevieve speaks with her mother about professionalism and respect, and about the two spending time together to tour the property. Marek trains in the courtyard with Sir Brannock Hale, and practices a new fighting style until Velmon approaches him afterwards with an offer, the chance to speak with his brother's soul one last time, still bound within Shoni's palace within the Blade of Ozin. Marek agrees, and through meditation, the two enter Shoni's dwelling, allowing Marek to share a final heartfelt exchange with his brother before Velmon releases his brother's soul to the beyond. Marek thanks Velmon and departs, while Velmon reflects further on the possibility of freeing Shoni in his entirety. Zero spends time to tend to Sizik's injuries to ensure a smooth recovery process, and upon returning to the chateau, Pura attempts to leave his recently purchased gift on Vanessa Songweaver's doorstep, but is caught by Genevieve, leading to a tense exchange that ultimately softens as eventually Genevieve acknowledges that her mother's happiness matters to her, and Pura explains his good intentions to pursue romance with her mother, leaving the gift with a letter and rejoining the party. That evening, in the living room, Lorem Ipsum reviews several magical defensive strategies proposed by Madame Lepori through Marigold Burrows, choosing to pursue some while postponing others for the time being. Over the following days, they attend to various personal matters as the coastal chateau works on its own projects. But, on the final day of the month of Imtet, around midday, a mysterious letter appears at the doorstep, with no visible courier. Aldrich opens it and reads the contents aloud, a threatening message from their recent foe, the Titanium Blade, and in the wake of the letter, Lorem Ipsum is left to consider what comes for them next, for the city of Provenere, and perhaps for the nation of Fenere itself. In the wake of this threatening letter, Marigold enters the living room of the coastal chateau to inform Lorem Ipsum that their estate is ready for orders, and that the process of consolidating into a noble house requires at least 3 official endorsements from reputable allies. Madame Lepori also swings by to finish setting up a magical alarm system on the property, and secretly delivers an invitation to an urgent meeting later that night at 7:09 p.m. While Genevieve elects to spend most of her time outside the estate, and Marek continues his training, the rest of Lorem Ipsum instruct the hirelings for various issues and set out across the city to gather their endorsements. Sizek and Paloma visit the McKinnon estate, who are happy to support Lorem Ipsum after some discussion. And Paloma then travels to the Storm Dojo, where she gifts Kaiko Stormpaw a remarkable sum of 20,000 gold pieces to clear the dojo's debts and ensure it remains open in the future. He is stunned and deeply grateful, offering Paloma anything in return for her generosity, though she insists that continuing to train students is sufficient. Elsewhere, Velmon visits the Berdier estate and speaks with Miss Ellis Berdier regarding an endorsement. Though Velmon initially had hoped to speak with Lydia, Miss Berdier welcomes the conversation and formally introduces herself. She acknowledges that, like Lydia and Darrell, she is aware of Shoni's presence, though she chooses not to elaborate before granting her official endorsement to Lorem Ipsum. Meanwhile, Pura visits the house of Sir Pricklesworth von Meonte, Esquire III, but fails to persuade him to support Lorem Ipsum's efforts, partially due to a disagreement regarding alcohol and whether or not plants should in fact consume it. Ultrix visits the house of Miss Priscilla Cleves to determine where her house formally stands. She listens to his proposal and explains that as head of the Uniprov Airship Trading Company, she cannot formally commit to such a venture, but admits that she might be persuaded through a more private business affair. After offering 50,000 gold pieces, she invites Ultrix to a private chamber. After the transaction begins, Ultrix notices calmer breathing and glimpses reddened eyes before a poisoned dagger is suddenly plunged into his chest, realizing that Miss Cleves is a mechanical duplicate. Ultrix narrowly escapes with his life by activating the siphon and teleporting away moments before the construct detonates, leveling the entire property. Back at the estate, Ultrix recounts what transpired, and several members recall references to high-priority patients mentioned in Karamira's documents in Oshia-Vester, realizing that Miss Priscilla Cleves was on that list, raising now unsettling questions of who else in the city of Provenere may have been replaced. And implications aside, the group must proceed to their evening meeting just outside Provenere, where they share their discoveries with their allies. The discussion begins to secure hard evidence of a suspected far-reaching conspiracy, suggesting that the Gilded Order may not have arisen by accident, but instead was deliberately orchestrated in formation, though the questions of who and why remain yet somewhat unanswered. Adding to the urgency, Relzar Kinper reveals that their insider within the Gilded Order saw orders to deploy a large portion of the Gilded Order's forces to Hastara for riot control. As tensions escalate and Escapia threatens to declare war on Fenere after claiming the recent infiltration attempt on the Bladed Islet was actually a Fenarian strike team, which proves and provides validity to Azazal's threats in his letter earlier that day, the political landscape begins to destabilize, and our adventurers and their allies in the city resolve to take advantage of the situation carefully without sacrificing any moral footing, forming a plan to deliver truthful intel to Oshia-Vester while also initiating a coordinated effort within the city to create lasting change. With a resolve to pass this information to their contacts in Fenere with haste, Lorem Ipsum returns back home to discuss further plans as nightfall sets in. In the late hours of Mtet 50th, Lorem Ipsum returns to the coastal chateau to brief their allies on what was uncovered at the meeting. Ultrix, accompanied by Marek, travels beyond the city limits to send a message to Raylan Vost in Oshia-Vester, relaying their findings. Her response is one of shock, but she provides a request for proof that must be provided before any action can be taken. Back at the estate, Velmon retreats to his room, but is later confronted by Genevieve, who sings a composition written by his mother, and the two share a meaningful moment. With little left to do that night, the party retires, and at dawn, Marigold greets them over breakfast, surprised that Lorem Ipsum has already secured the necessary endorsements, and wishes them a happy autumn equinox. As Ultrix and Marek work on crafting projects, Paloma, Velmon, and Genevieve notice distant rumbles and look skyward to see the Gilded Order has airships departing Provenere, clearly deploying as warned the night before. Curious about the list of high-priority patients, Paloma convinces Genevieve, now disguised as Jean, and Velmon to accompany her to the Voyage Reserve to investigate Bank President Sir Galad Ravanian, a name also on the list. After navigating bureaucracy and staging a dramatic distraction, Paloma uses Mirex to deploy arcane countermeasures, which causes him to overheat and melt, revealing him to be indeed another mechanical duplicate. The trio flees across the Hex, stopping briefly at Gnome Depot, where Sizik joins them and Paloma acquires adamantine wire. The group then returns to the chateau, where Sizik detours to commission a project from Madame Lepori at Hexus and Scrolls, and presents the metallic remains of the fake Sir Galad Vervanian. Paloma offers it to Ultrix, and then the group then shifts their focus to reconnaissance at Consalis Keep. With reduced staffing due to the morning's deployment, they exploit the opening. Genevieve, again as Jean, begins the process of a false enlistment, while Ultrix gets himself arrested with Marek in tow, which gives Paloma and Sizik a chance to reach the upper floors. Through a mix of stealth and clever magic, they infiltrate Vilas Kinper's office, where he quietly reveals himself as the insider feeding information to the allied houses. A rapid plan of great risk but unique possibility is formed, where Vilas creates a distraction while Paloma and Cizik break into the office of the head of the Gilded Order, the righteous Ithrenius. Inside, they uncover critical intelligence and insights. No evidence seems to indicate that the Gilded Order knew it was orchestrated, nor does it seem to be tied to Azazal. But Paloma finds extensive documentation on the Golden Terrace, a costly new base of operations east of the city, funded by Provius, Fenere, some of the houses within Provenere, and other taxation sources. Cizik finds a hidden safe, and through the powers of fate and luck, somehow opens it to reveal the charter document of the Gilded Order, mentioning Admiral Thicket receiving the suggestion from a mysterious figure known as the Man. Alongside it, though, are also references to the Sapphire Moon, with an identical map that they found in Tony's shack many months ago, and questions of the intent and extent of their reach. Also in the safe is a 2-decades-old document mentioning a strange crash outside Provenere that was handed to Claremont University to be investigated at the start of Provenere's massive development. Cizik also discovers a celestial text describing the deity of military discipline and honor, suggesting a deeper religious influence. As Ithrenius returns to her office, though, Cizik casts banishment on her before she can even see who is in her office, buying them enough time to reset the room and escape. Moments later, alarms sound throughout the keep as Lorem Ipsum regroups and withdraws, now carrying additional pieces of crucial information. After fleeing Consilas Keep and reviewing what they uncovered, Lorem Ipsum turns its attention to the mechanical duplicate of Sir Galad Revenian, recovered earlier that day. After having their defenders bury and then exhume the construct that they had buried, Ultrix spends 6 hours carefully removing its outer hull to expose its inner workings. The group then divides the investigation to be more efficient. Paloma analyzes the runic systems, identifying anti-detection and anti-dispelling glyphs, while Ultrix, assisted by Velmon, examines the volatile orange energy core, learning it can either detonate within seconds or be weaponized into a focused beam, and discovers its composition can be replicated, which includes Arcanist gemstone dust, distilled essence, mindbender flour, bismuth crystals, catalytic salts, and a trace of humanoid blood. And Ultrix learns how to replicate it. Pura studies the physiologic mimicry systems, noting that their sophistication has subtle flaws detectable under scrutiny, while Zeros investigates the central processing structure, but narrowly avoids a catastrophic error while extracting key design insights. As Daenerys sets and the first moon Prim rises, they also bring out Daikia for further analysis, allowing her to extract a potent serpent toxin, draft schematics for grappling chain arms, and identify a structural weakness beneath the axilla. Paloma uses Mirex to replicate runic patterns, while Ultrix later uncovers the most alarming truth. The construct's memories are tethered to a living source, meaning that the real Sir Galad Revenian is still alive somewhere in the world, and that any disruption to that signal within the duplicate would kill the real person instantly. Working late into the night, though, Lorem Ipsum traces the arcane tether through the tapestry eastward to the city of Extalis, revealing a new lead for them. The following morning, they regroup over breakfast and decide to prepare a route to Oshivester to share their findings. Ultrix, Paloma, and Cizik visit Madame Lepori, who appears distressed and later reveals that her sister's husband recently died, Sir Galad Revenian, prompting the group to carefully explain their suspicions and try to console her, without letting her know too much. Cizik checks on his commission, and Lepori agrees to Ultrix's request to contact the Collegium Tidal to secure access to a teleportation circle, offering to assist them later that evening. Meanwhile, Velmon visits the Bradir residence and speaks privately with Lydia, Ellis, and Arel, gaining deeper insight into their connection to Shoni, though he leaves unsettled and needing time to process all that he learned. And as the day progresses, Lorem Ipsum must prepare for their journey to the Twin Reservoirs later today, and depart after dinner that night, with Madame Lepori invited in tow. As evening settles over Provenere, Lorem Ipsum gathers for dinner at the Kosol Chateau, with Madame Lepori, to share baked potatoes while discussing their plan to teleport to the Collegium Tidal in Oshivester. After the meal, Daikia joins them, and Madame Lepori sends them on their way, and the group arrives in Oshivester, where they are greeted by Professor Codius Rocane, who escorts them outside and bids them farewell. Ultrix sends a word preemptively to Raylan Vost on their arrival the following day, and the party splits to survey the city as night begins to approach, in which the Waveguard is quite active, doing different exercises with the current political tensions brewing. Daikia departs to see her father for the first time in decades, while Ultrix heads to the Cascade Market in hydroxylvexin to gather components for a mechanical detector, overhearing Waveguard discuss unusual tidal shifts attributed to Felro's altered orbit in recent days. Meanwhile, Pura and Genevieve visit the Puddle Jump Bazaar and share drinks and overhear rumors of their own, most notably that the Aquatoria has passed a Senate bill authorizing war powers amid the escalating tensions between Escapia and Fenere. The two also reflect on Genevieve's past, in how she met Marek and Pura's intentions with her mother, Vanessi. Elsewhere, Paloma and Velmon investigate the residence of Gavivar Thedes in the Stillview enclave of Hydroxylvexin, only to discover that his decayed corpse lies in its wake, and a home has been meticulously stripped of valuables and magical traces, seemingly that someone deliberately staged a scene and erased any evidence. Sizik visits Claremont University's Hydroxylvexin branch, and in a restricted back archive in the library uncovers financial records suggesting tuition funds are being funneled to Provenere and potentially into the Gilded Order's control. At a chapel in the Plaza Les Fontaines, Marek speaks with brother Theodule Morley, finding quiet solace and perspective, if not the answers he seeks of his ancestors. The group reconvenes at the Hydrohaven, secures lodging from proprietor Bruzzy Carver, and inside the siphon reviews their findings and tomorrow's plans. Aldrich completes his crafting of an electromagnet intended to detect mechanical constructs, and after a calm night's rest, Lorem Ipsum gathers in the dining area of the tavern for breakfast, and then promptly departs to meet Raylan Vost at the Grand Pearl Hotel, where they are welcomed by Opalina Caithmere and brought to the Sapphire Lounge. There, they are presented with an opportunity to share their discoveries, leaving Raylan Vost visibly concerned and frankly surprised by the scope of the conspiracy that they lay bare. She informs them that the Chancellor Inthedin Namigoth will hear them out but will require proof, and instructs them to meet her at Cascadant's Spire at 6:45, or should I say, to be precise, 6:46 p.m. With that, Raylan departs, leaving Lorem Ipsum the rest of the day in the Twin Reservoirs to prepare for what is likely to be a decisive meeting that night. Lorem Ipsum temporarily parts ways with Zeros, who leaves to check on Daikyo, while Sizik remains at the hotel, and the rest of the group departs from the Grand Pearl Hotel for the Collegium Tidal in search of Marek's sister, Genoma, following a lead from a note left by Zareth when he died that points them to Dr. P. O'Brackett. Unable to locate him in his office, though, they learn he is lecturing in another building and make their way there. Aldrich slips into the lecture hall, while Genevieve attempts to create distractions among the students via message cantrips, only to accidentally involve the professor himself, causing brief confusion that nonetheless gives Marek the opportunity to encounter Genoma for the first time since they were separated in childhood. Though they barely know each other, Genoma senses the connection, and when Marek tells her of Zareth's death, she initially denies it before breaking down as truth truly settles in. Giving her space, Lorem Ipsum regroups as a rainstorm rolls in and then splits up again. Aldrich, Pura, Paloma, and Velmon return to the residence of Gavivar Thedes, where Paloma uses Mirek's legends lore to gather additional insight into the death of Gavivar Thedes, while the group conducts a thorough sweep and prepares for their meeting. Elsewhere, Marek and Genevieve spend hours searching a luxurious residence known as the Lakeborn Luxoriums in Oshivester before finally locating Genoma again, where Marek offers to cover the remainder of tuition that she has and leave the door open for rebuilding their relationship as adults somewhere in the future. As dusk draws near, though, Lorem Ipsum reconvenes outside of Cascadant's Spire, where Raylan Vost escorts them through Waveguard security and down a spiral stairwell into the underwater ballroom for a private audience with Chancellor Inthedin Namigoth, reflecting on the threat of looming conflict between the Union of Fenere and Escapia. The distressed and overwhelmed Chancellor invites them to present their findings, but before they begin, Aldrich offers his newly crafted electromagnet as a precaution. The Chancellor accepts, but when it clicks firmly to her shoulders, the room falls silent, tensions mounting as realization sets in that this is what will follow will in fact not be peaceful at all. In the underwater ballroom of Cascadant's Spire, the Chancellor glances at the magnet clinging to her shoulder and calmly remarks, "Well, that won't do," just as an audible tick emits from her, and two identical Chancellors emerge from the adjoining chambers, all three of them revealed to be duplicate mechanicals of the true Chancellor not present here. Chaos erupts instantly. Raylan Vost panics as the truth is revealed, and Lorem Ipsum surges into action. Paloma and Marek strike hard against the mechanical duplicates, while Pura, Genevieve, and a hastily summoned Sizik move to support. One of the constructs takes flight as the others engage directly, forcing the party to split focus. Ultrix, with Velmon's help, begins working frantically to disable an active detonation sequence, while also searching for a way to sever the arcane tether linking the duplicate to the real Chancellor, wherever she is. Paloma, moving with explosive speed, stuns one construct and dismantles the other, but her sonic boom sends crawling and spidering fractures up the great glass panes, holding back a Union conduit canal just outside the windows. And with the window integrity threatening to give way, the battle rages on. Time bombs tick, enemies press, and Lorem Ipsum spreads their efforts across the fray. Pura and Genevieve disrupt the flying construct, sending it crashing down, while Sizik continues to reinforce the group's efforts. In a desperate move, Velmon opens a rift to Guyana via Shoni right before the glass finally shatters, and a torrent of water floods into the chamber, some caught by the rift, but others and most overwhelming the effort. Amid the chaos, Velmon is slammed down, drawing a final breath as the waters rush in. Genevieve rushes to him, but finds no breath to restore. Meanwhile, Ultrix, Sizik, and Pura manage to halt the final detonation and sever the last connection, forcing the group to abandon the chamber and plan for escape. Reaching the upper balcony, Ultrix hands Paloma a volatile core from Akadon, and with a precise shock, she manages to revive Velmon, who is then dragged by Ultrix into the rising waters to seal the rift that he opened moments ago. With the chamber filling with water fast, Paloma and Marek break open one of the large doors with a powerful and coordinated kick, and the group stumbles into the stairwell and heads for the foyer of Castigant Spire once again on the ground level, where they must explain the situation to the stunned and quite intense-looking Waveguard. With Raylan's authority present and a hastily formed explanation, the story holds just enough. Raylan then outlines the implications of the recently enacted War Powers Act. Should the Chancellor be incapacitated, the Admiral of the Waveguard assumes control. Though she is confident the Aquatoria will launch an investigation into the sudden death of the fake Chancellors and the actual missing in action real Chancellor, fate cannot be left up to time in the current moment. And for now, Raylan speculates that a new administration is imminent, and massive change is now on the horizon. Raylan urges Lorem Ipsum to return to the Grand Pearl Hotel for the night to rest, promising to meet them again at dawn to get them aboard an airship to return to Provenary. That is all for this episode of Arcane Adventures Recapped, as again, we covered the 16 episodes of Chapter 9 Between the Threads. But don't forget, the adventure does in fact continue, and we'll see you again as we pick up in Chapter 10. But until then, have a good night.